How's it going, everybody, and welcome back to World End Economica Episode 1. It's been a little bit of hard to bring this episode to you because I had to go through a few things. A recent Windows 11 update has just removed Bluetooth as an option for some reason. Like, I can't turn it on, and I was using my wireless headphones, like my earbuds, for a bit. While my headphones aren't working. Well, one of them isn't working, one half of them. And yeah, I couldn't make it work, so I'm using my old headset once again. I'm still in the new place. This is my second recording in the new place, so sorry, I'm talking again a bit differently than normal. I'll try to talk at a regular volume so everyone can hear me well. I noticed the last episode I was a bit quieter at points, and same with Fairy Deer, funnily enough. And also, I randomly had a virus on my computer, which I managed to remove. I don't know what that was from, but it's not a big one, so got rid of it. I'm doing another scan, keeping an eye on everything, and I haven't been robbed yet, so that's good. But to help prevent me getting robbed, and if I do get robbed, I could do with your money, and a good way to give me money is to pre-order or purchase my book, The Protector Volume 1, an original English light novel, dark fantasy story that I've been writing for years now, and it is Volume 1 is finally out. A Volume 1, like a version of the story that I think everyone will enjoy. It is really been a lot of work getting it out, and the release date is inching closer. It's closer every day. January 10th, 2025 is the release date. Ebook, paperback, and audiobook. Audiobook date to BC. Alright, well, let's get back into World End Economica. Let's see what we have in store. Lisa wasn't in the living room, so I guessed she was in her room. I made some coffee, headed back to my room, and turned on the computer. In order to solve one problem, I made a single move. Thus, my next move for the next problem was to take a look at the stocks. My favorite part. Oh wait. No, we're not talking about stocks. Ooh. However, the quiet of the church apparently was merely the calm before the storm, as they said back on Earth. Several hours later, from far away, I could hear the muffled sound of a telephone. Immediately afterwards, from the second floor, I could hear Lisa's hurried footsteps heading downstairs. It had been 3 hours since Lisa rushed out of the church. The day had already turned dark, and, having eaten only one steamed bun for lunch, I was definitely hungry now. The church had fallen silent, an indication that Lisa and Hagana had not returned yet. Lisa had undoubtedly left in a hurry because of Hagana. Did she perhaps get scolded by the police? But I felt that there wasn't a reason to rush like that if that were simply the case. Besides, it was Lisa's hobby to shelter people like her, so I figured she would have been calmer about it. So if that were the case, then all I could think of were situations like Hagana's parents finding her, and her being about to get caught and needing help. And thus, I was oddly worried, pacing back and forth in the living room, sneaking peeks through the curtains. The timing of the phone ringing in the quiet living room made me jump in surprise, pathetically. I would have been more hesitant if Lisa's terminal had rung, but the ringing came from the phone on the wall, so I picked it up after the fifth ring. Hello? Hal? I was relieved to hear Lisa's voice, but at the same time, I realized she hadn't contacted me for several hours after leaving without a word, making annoyance well up in me. Boo. Before I could complain about it, Lisa continued talking. I'll be home soon, so could you start the bath for me? Huh? Make sure it's hot. Also, in the cupboard, I've set aside some cocoa. So go ahead and make some. Make it as sweet as you can. Cocoa? Bath? Better yet, where are... Before I could finish, Lisa hung up. I looked at the telephone receiver I had just been talking into and furiously put it back in place. Why did I have to take orders involving baths and cocoa without even an explanation? While fuming, I thought I would ignore her request, but in the end, I reconsidered and started the water for the bath. After that, I followed Lisa's instructions. I rummaged through the cupboard to find a package that contained what appeared to be high-grade cacao, and prepared it according to the recipe on the back. While milk was boiling in the saucepan, the delightful fragrance was enough to make me want some too, and I went to fetch an extra cup. I heard the sound of a door opening and closing from within the church. Muttering about her finally being back, and sighing wearily, though I hadn't really done much of anything, I turned off the stove since the milk had started boiling. Well, the hot cocoa is almost done. Just as I took the saucepan in my hand and poured the milk into a cup, Haganah walked through the living room with great strides and dove into her room. That wasn't really an exaggeration, as the slamming of her door with all her might seemed to shake the church itself. Lisa froze in her tracks in the middle of the living room, looking like she was about to call out to Haganah to stop her. The always calm, sometimes dim-witted but dependable older woman was nowhere to be seen. She was so tired she didn't even notice me looking at her, as her outstretched hand towards Haganah eventually faltered. And when she realized that I was looking at her, she let out a small laugh. Thinking that I might have seen something that I shouldn't have, I went back to pouring the milk into the cup. Did you prepare it right? Lisa turned toward my back and said those words. Shouldn't you be talking about something else right now? That's what I thought to myself, but I couldn't outright criticize her. Probably. I see. I'm sure if I turned around, I would see Lisa with a strained smile on her face. I didn't want to see Lisa like that, so I focused on pouring milk instead. Oh, are you making too? I almost spilled the milk when I heard that. Yeah, I suppose so. Could you hand me one cup? At those words, I finally turned around, and I was startled. At first, it was dark, so I didn't notice it, but it was clear that the lower part of her right eye was swollen. What happened? At my words, Lisa inspected her top and pants. The feeling of irritation as I looked at her overrode the feeling of how silly her actions were. Your face. Ah. As soon as Lisa realized it, she looked up and with her right hand touched her face with her slender fingers. Seeing how painful that looked made my face flinch in reaction. It was nothing, I just ran into something. It was nothing? I don't know about how it works on Earth, but on the moon that doesn't look like it was nothing. Even I knew about Newton's third law of motion. Lower gravity meant less weight, and less weight meant less impact. I knew from experience because I had traded many a blow. Lisa looked embarrassed and had a strained smile on her face as I saw through her ruse. She then looked towards me. Would you mind giving me some cocoa? Normally, I'd be angry at her for dodging the question. However, I couldn't say any more with Lisa in front of me. At the very least, my face showed displeasure as I stirred the cup I had poured milk into and placed it on the table. Thank you. Lisa smiled as she thanked me and took a seat at the table. After that, acting as if she had just returned from a trip into a freezer, she held the cup in her hands, blew on it several times, and then sipped lightly from it. It was at that point that I realized I had forgotten to put sugar in it, but it seemed that Lisa didn't mind it at all. Or rather, it felt like she wasn't really sensing the taste at all. Her attention wasn't on what was in front of her, but somewhere else. I deliberately slammed the sugar jar on the table with a thud. Sugar? Ah, thank you. After saying that, she dropped a single sugar cube into her cup listlessly. And then, as if being satisfied with that single action, she didn't pick the cup back up. Well? I couldn't take it any longer and asked the question. Lisa's reaction was slow, and I thought she was just ignoring me at first, but she slowly looked up at me. What happened? As something of a freeloader, it's not like I had any direct connection to Hagana or Lisa, but I felt that I had a right to ask. Do I have to talk about it? And then, like a child, Lisa responded to me, smiling slightly. Rather than getting angry, I was getting scared. Even then, I gathered up some strength within me and spoke. Well, I did make you this hot cocoa. I had a sour expression on my face when I spoke, and Lisa looked at the cup of cocoa in her hands before looking at me once more. I could see that her face looked somewhat relieved as she was blowing on the cocoa. That's true, you did make cocoa for me. I also prepared the bath. Well, I suppose at this point I can't just say nothing then. Lisa drank her cocoa and sighed. The silence was long, and I felt that if it were to drag on any longer, it'd be stifling enough to knock me over. Yesterday, Toyama came over, remember? Toyama? Yeah? This was a continuation of that talk. After saying that, Lisa drank the cacao once more. They weren't words of explanation, but even without my urging, I had faith that Lisa would explain everything. Yesterday's talk was, well, I suppose you could say, simply a demand with regards to the loan. Huh? I raised my voice unintentionally in response. But I just paid the interest. Yes, Toyama was grateful for that. That was why he was so polite, you know. Now that she mentioned it, it was true that Toyama wasn't really being coercive. He was actually being humble and apologetic. On top of that, he even offered up a prayer to the statue of the crucified man at the altar. Perhaps he was well aware that he had come with an unreasonable request. The loan, you see, he asked for it to be paid back in full. In full? My words stopped there, as I did some number crunching in my head with regards to the financial situation of the church. The loan was at 50,000 mols, with a monthly interest payment of 200 mols. However, I didn't even get back the 200 mols I had put up. Given that, there was no possibility of paying back the loan in full. Why do you have to? Is it written in the contract? No, the loan is indefinite. Toyama always does it like that. I can only loan money out to people I trust, so pay it back whenever you can, he would say. It sounded like a nice deal, but interest was still being collected. Hence, the situation was the same. However, Toyama did have a financial backer. Financial backer? This person gave him the original funds that let him loan out money to people. Oh, and? That financial backer appears to have passed away in the hospital. So that was the reason why Lisa needed to repay the entire amount. But on the other hand, with his financial backer dead, wouldn't that be a good thing for Toyama? The person who gave Toyama money was apparently someone he knew back on Earth, and had very uncertain conditions for borrowing, he said. And then when he died, a relative of his from Earth arrived and sold the loan document Toyama had to someone else. Ah, I see. It wasn't hard to understand that. Yes, I can't blame those people either, but it put Toyama in a difficult situation. Up until now, it was a sloppily written contract, but because he had known that man for such a long time, they had mockingly added some extra stipulations to the contract. Toyama actually never managed to make a profit. Oh, I totally had a hunch. An unsecured loan at 6% interest isn't feasible. Speaking of which, Hal, you did mention that before, didn't you? And because of that, they approached Toyama to pay all that money back. And that total amount is, well, over 800,000 moors, I think. That amount of money was enough to build a nice small house in the White Belt. If you were on Earth, whether it be dollars, yen, or marks, it was a princely sum of money no matter how you looked at it. Naturally, there's no way Toyama could have all that much money. If there was someone in need who was also someone he thought he could trust, he would loan out a lot. If there was someone in need who was also someone he thought he could trust, he would loan a lot out to them, even with his family's funds, even when his own family's funds were running low. Thus, all Toyama had in his possession were loan contracts. So the people who pursued Toyama to return the money said that if he wasn't able to pay back the money when they would buy back the contracts at a discount... Really? I'm sorry, I misread something there. Wait. Oh, I skipped forward. God damn it. Loan contracts. The people who pursued Toyama to return the money said that if he wasn't able to pay back the money, then they would buy back the contracts at a discount. Really? Oh, god damn it! Let me look! Okay, really. If that's how it is, that's not too bad. I thought that for a brief moment, but when Lisa looked at me, I realized that there was more to this. So in other words, the lender changes from Toyama to these guys then. Yeah. Oh my god, I keep skipping this. Yes, for us the loan is indefinite, but as a precaution, the contract is reviewed every 3 years. Toyama said that if there are any issues found during that time, things will be bad. Bad? In other words, you'll have to sell everything off in order to pay it off. I don't really understand, but it sounds like the court can force a disposition. In that case, no matter what assets you have, they'd have to be sold in a fire sale. So even a loan of 50,000 moors could be difficult. So that is why he asked you to pay it all back now? Exactly. He said instead of hurrying to sell at a loss, take the time to find someone who would be willing to buy the property at a high price. Toyama honestly meant well when he came by. If everything Toyama said could be believed, that is. I wasn't going to say it out loud, though. I honestly didn't think that Toyama was a sneaky kind of guy. Of course, there were adults who possessed the down and dirty skills of deception, but if that were the case, I felt that Toyama would have presented himself in a much better light. But... And as Lisa punctuated the conversation, my mind stopped wandering. Hagana, that child is rather sharp, and yesterday it seemed that she caught wind that something was going on. And then it seemed as if she caught wind of this talk as well. In a fit of rage, did she confront Toyama then? I asked nervously as Lisa looked like she was slipping deeper into depression. She nodded. At that moment, the image of Hagana as she came to look for Chris above the tunnel crossed my mind. I went to Chris because I figured she'd know about Hagana, and Hagana probably went to Chris because she figured Chris would know all about the neighborhood. Since Toyama lent money in this neighborhood, certainly she would have seen his tired appearance before. It was dreadful. Honestly, it caused Toyama a lot of distress. Even in normal circumstances, for a moneylender, even if they don't actually do anything bad, It's too easy to suspect that they are capable of doing something bad anyway. Without knowing the facts, Toyama looks like a bad guy, doesn't he? Even then, he's someone who's known in this area and has been able to continue his work without any major problems, but... And that injury? Oh, this? Lisa laughed weakly, and her gaze turned from the living room to farther down the corridor. And then, in a rather low voice, she spoke. Thanks to this, I was able to calm Hagana down from her anger. In other words, at that moment, Hagana had either thrown or hit something, probably. I know that she did that all for me, but that was always the end result. That time with me in the clothing store was the same thing. She always seems to blame herself for what happens, and if there is anything that she can do, no matter where it is, she will try to do something, I imagine. A difficult personality. Lisa did not disagree with my mumbling. She's a serious girl, stubbornly serious. Why can't she get rewarded for her toils, I wonder? Honestly, what was the Lord thinking? Lisa seemed to laugh in sorrow, then looked downcast before falling silent. But I couldn't stand the silence, and spoke up quickly. Well, what are you going to do? Eh? The loan. Return what was given. That was expected. But if everything in the world went that well, I'd be living in a penthouse in Newton City by now. Yes, what should we do? As Lisa said that, she looked troubled as she smiled. If she really had no way to repay that money, then I might just blow my lid. I would probably think that she should do whatever she could and work. But Lisa actually had a means to pay it back. If she sold off things like those books, odds are she would be able to pay back the loan. But even then, Lisa thought about that before and was at a loss. Lisa cared for those books as if they were a part of her, and if she were to sell those books, she'd never see them again. Studying ancient Earth religions at a top-notch university on the moon, setting up a church, a relic from centuries past, sheltering runaways and those that have nowhere else to go, reading hundreds-year-old books from Earth about God on rainy days. Those were the things that she enjoyed doing. For someone so unsuited for the moon, Lisa was very mature. Besides, if I were to make a list of people I could rely on, I'm sure Lisa's name would be propelled to the top. Even so, that same Lisa gave a troubled smile. There was no doubt Hagana ran over to Toyama's place and lashed out insults at him. If not that, then perhaps she pressed the point of selling herself off. As it was Hagana we were talking about, either possibility was believable. Lisa wrapped her hands around the cup of cocoa I poured for her, tilted it slowly, and sipped on it. Cocoa always tastes good. Somehow those empty words were gut-wrenching to me. Did you prepare the bath as well? Just as you asked me to. Thank you. I guess this is the part where I am supposed to tell you and Hagana over the phone to remember to eat and get along with each other. Huh. It wasn't a joke worth laughing at, so I just let out a snort of discontent. It didn't seem as if Lisa wanted to laugh either, and she put down the cup and stood up. Thank you very much. There's another cup left. Lisa paused for a moment and laughed slightly as she shrugged her shoulders. I don't want to get fat. Oh, I hope you won't mind if I use the bath first. Huh? No, that's fine by me. I'll be angry if you peep. Of course I won't. I reacted reflexively, and only then did Lisa laugh happily. Leaving behind that smile, she went towards the bathroom. It seemed that her manner of walking had a listless, forlorn manner to it. With a thud, the door closed, and I stared at it for no real reason. When I heard the door to the bath open and close, I averted my eyes from the door, as if a surveillance camera was looking right at me. My eyes then turned towards the single cup left in the sink. It had already started to cool down as a thin layer was floating on top of the milk. What was Lisa going to do after this? What was going to be done was already decided. Without a doubt, she was going to sell those books. The answer was decided from the beginning. All that was left was a question of when she'd commit to it. Since it was someone else's affair, I could say it like that. I was aware of this. That is why it was no surprise that Lisa was in the bathroom crying. I've heard from the ruffians in my hometown that the seaside, or even a bathroom, was a suitable place for an adult to cry. Was there a good resolution to all of this? Probably not, I suppose. If there was, then it would have definitely been carried out already. Otherwise, there would be no reason to suffer a slow death, paying interest every month. Paying off the principal would eventually pay off the loan, but if one simply paid the interest, then the loan would never go away. Any grade schooler knew that. However, Lisa had trouble paying the interest, and I had to step in the end. Thus, she had no choice but to rely on the final option. Lisa had to sell a part of her. It was better than Hagana selling off her entire body. That was probably how she convinced Hagana, I'd imagine. Much like Earth, the moon was also a place where only the strongest survived. On the moon, they were able to take a place that didn't have any signs of life and forcibly build a city on the surface. So there really wasn't any allowance for doing anything half-hearted. Space was cold and dark. I wonder if Hagana was crying. Perhaps she was. She was probably blaming herself. If I were in their shoes, it would definitely be quite painful. Lisa was a good person, and that made it all the more painful. Toyama had said that Hagana didn't care about Lisa just because she'd given her shelter. I had a feeling about that as well. If it were concerning anyone else in Lunar City that was as loony as Lisa, I wouldn't care as much. 50,000 moles. I mouthed that amount of money once more. 50,000 moles. While staring at the cooling cocoa in the sink, I wanted to curse God if he existed. 50,000 moles. Is Homeboy gonna try... Oh my god, he is. He fucking is, isn't he? He's gonna actually try and pay it off. Maybe. How much money did I have? Before Lisa came out of the bath, I went back to my own room and turned on the laptop. On the screen, the trading window was open. Cash balance, 72,610 moles. For someone working in a top company in this lunar city, it might have been peanuts, but for everyone else it was a fair sum of money. I had built this up from the 2,000 moles I had on hand originally. Every day until night, concentrating without eating or drinking, literally building it up with dogged determination. Taking out 50,000 moles would leave me with 22,000. Ooh, red. Those numbers made me want to throw up. When I don't even want to spend a few dozen moles, was there any need for me to get 50k moles for someone else's sake? Just what did Lisa mean to me? Of course, I owed her for saving me from the police. But that was it. Even though I'm living here, I'm properly paying for that right. So even though Lisa really was in trouble, there was absolutely no reason why I had to part with my own money. On top of that, Lisa had a way of paying back the debt. Sell the old books in her room. That would be all it took. Despite all this, I couldn't shake the mental image of Lisa being that exhausted. For the first time, I learned that watching someone have to part with something truly dear to them could be physically painful from the watcher themselves. And that was why I stared at the laptop screen, unable to move. In my hands was a way to rescue Lisa from her plight. Furthermore, I even had a reason to give it to her. She had said that after selling those books, she would never be able to get her hands on them again. But in my case, that wasn't true. If my investment methods were truly great, if they'd bring me results befitting my dreams, then giving away 50,000 moles wouldn't be one bit of a problem. Just grow the remaining amount like crazy. A few years later, 50,000 moles would be merely something to sneeze at. With the 2,000 moles I had, I grew it 35 times to 70,000 moles in 3 months. Holy shit, wait, hold the fucking phone. 3 months? I didn't realize it was this short of a fucking time span. 3 months! Fucking do it, my guy. How? Do it. You have found a family here. People that care. Do it. If I had faith in the correctness of my ways, then I shouldn't be feeling this hesitation at handing over 50,000 moles. That means that the thing making me hesitate was either some wretched stinginess or a lack of faith in my investment methods. I was supposed to have decided that if I couldn't fulfill my dreams, there'd be no point in me living. And yet, even though I was on the verge of declaring that I could not fulfill my dreams, I was losing my nerve. If I couldn't just casually pop off the 50,000 moles, then it'd all be a lie. I'd be a liar. In front of the laptop, I tightened my hands into fists. I ground my teeth at just how pathetic I was. It was enough to make me want to cry. Are you really that small a person? Some punk who only knows how to pick up pennies? I berated myself with those insults. I looked up and looked listlessly around the room, so much that you'd think the right answer was hidden somewhere in there. No. I knew what the right answer was, and I just didn't have the guts to take the plunge. And then, when my line of sight fell on the divider between this room and the next, I recalled Hagana. Hagana had the courage to take the plunge. She had the courage to say, "Buy me." Moreover, saying it not like some sheltered, self-centered brat, but as someone who had really been sold from Earth. As someone who knew exactly what it meant to be sold, she had the courage to step into that hell once more. But Lisa would never accept that. Hagana probably really felt that if only Lisa could be saved, then whatever happened to Hagana herself was acceptable. I thought, compared to Hagana's troubles, my dilemma was a luxury. He's having empathy! Holy shit! Well done, Hal. You've been so heartless for so long, it's good to see you have empathy. I recall the exchange we had in the living room when I had thought to make peace with her. We are doing all that we can to survive. Hagana's words struck me once more in the chest. Was I doing all that I could to survive? Was I doing things to the limit of my abilities? Whoa! Okay, that was the moment. That was then. That was when I remembered the investment contest. Prize money. Dashing to the Economic Research Center's homepage, I logged in and looked at the summary. For the top-ranking people, there were prizes. First got 200,000 moles, second got 50, and third got 30, while fourth and fifth each had 20. Getting second would be wonderful, and even third would be a great help. But what moved my heart was the existence of the investment contest itself. Even if I lost at the contest, it wouldn't affect my wealth. The contest was like a free lottery. On top of that, there was an important thing. A very important thing. I once again looked up and turned around. A wall was there, dividing this room from the next. Past that, Hagana was surely crying. She must be there, blaming herself and crying over how she couldn't do anything for her beloved Lisa. Hagana, who clumsily bumbled her way through haggling as a way of thanking me. And when I told her how her haggling stunk, she was so angry she practically kicked my leg off and cried. Some of that must have been her base personality. But now that I thought about it, she might not have had any room to breathe. For example, even if she could teach kids math, she wasn't helping them advance to better schools in any real sense if she was unable to change the economic circumstances surrounding them. Hagana had probably been thrown around by conditions like that, brought to the moon, and then wound up at Lisa's place after running away. Apparently, math could solve problems elegantly. However, Hagana came here without solving a single real-world problem. In Toyama's way of saying things, like a chick that hadn't even broken its shell. With respect to Hagana, the investment contest was a big opportunity. I'm just going to take a sip of water. Oh man, that's good. Hey, second computer scan, by the way. No threats. Let's go, boys. W's in the chat. Hagana would be of help to Lisa, and I would be able to clear Hagana's misunderstanding. Plus, if it all went well, then we'd all be happy. Is he going to propose the whole, like, hey, look, I am going to enter this contest. This is what I've really been doing, okay? I've been investing money. I'm going to enter this investment contest. I need Hagana's math skills to help me win one of the top prizes, and I will give you that money to pay off the church, because then I will be scouted by these bigwigs in a big company. I can see it happening. That's how this is going to happen. Alright, let's do it. I grabbed the laptop, flew out of my room, and headed to the living room. The living room had returned to silence, and Lisa wasn't around. Immediately turning around and running down the hall, I headed up the steep stairs to the second floor. Along the way, I saw the light on in Lisa's room. Without hesitation and without knocking, I opened the door to Lisa's room. A surprise, Lisa turned around. She was in the middle of taking a few books from the shelf. Her hair was still damp, and her eyes were red and puffy. She looked like a girl who'd lost her way on a rainy day. I didn't want to see Lisa with such a face. That's why I opened the laptop and shoved the screen in the dazed Lisa's face. There's a way. Lisa sniffled like a kid. I want you to convince Hagana. Huh? I want to borrow her talents. I explained everything to Lisa. 10 minutes later, both of us were knocking on Hagana's door. Even when we knocked, Hagana didn't come out. Hagana, are you awake? Lisa asked in a small voice. If she had exhausted herself from crying and fell asleep, we could just wait until morning. Whatever painful things may happen, things always became more manageable if you could get past the dark night. By that logic, she would be calmer tomorrow, and broaching the subject to her then might have been better. That's what I was thinking, but after Lisa knocked on the door and called out, she put her ear by the door softly. At that moment her expression changed, as if she had heard a horrifying, revolting sound, like scraping of metal on metal. Before I could ask, Lisa put her hand on the doorknob and turned it slowly. She opened the door quietly, as if something in the room would be damaged within the slightest shock. The door slowly opened, and the light from the hallway flowed in the dark room. Lisa opened the door, but didn't try to enter the room immediately. I thought it was odd, but quickly saw the reason. Hagana's room was even barer than the one I had rented out, and it was completely dark. But within that dark room, there was a place where the darkness was even deeper. What the light fell upon was blackness. A black darker than darkness. A sight to which I didn't know what to say, didn't know what to think. A sickening taste filled my mouth. In a corner of the room, Hagana was hugging her knees and crying. Hagana. When Lisa finally called her name, Hagana's body shook like an absolutely terrified child. Hagana, I have something to talk about. There was no further reaction to Lisa's words. It seemed like she was trying to shrink her already slender body even more, hugging her knees desperately and burying her face in them. From the looks of it, instead of crying out of sadness, it seemed like she was crying out of anger. Squeeze down, shrink even more. If only I just didn't exist in the first place. That was the kind of anger I felt from her. Hagana. Lisa spoke softly and slowly stepped forward. It wasn't a big room, so she was in front of Hagana in a moment. Hagana's body quivered, then changed position. I had thought it was impossible for her to get smaller, but she pulled her feet in tightly, pulled her head down more, and then moved her arms from her knees up to cover her head. So... Huh? Hagana was shaking, so much that I could see it all the way from the door. Lisa's profile hardened, harder than if you shouted any insult in the world at her. Lisa was furious, but she wasn't angry at Hagana. Just by looking at Hagana, I could understand in a way. She was in the corner of the dark room, protecting her head, visibly shaking. No matter how angry Lisa was, Hagana should have known that there was no need to be this afraid. Even Chris, of all people, probably hadn't been this terrified. Hagana had lived a life where she had to tremble in the corner, protecting her head, even if she made any sort of mistake. Hagana hadn't raised her head and didn't seem to realize that the person in front of her was Lisa. She simply continued to apologize, so desperately the words wouldn't come out. What Lisa was probably angry at was the rain of misfortune that had come down upon Hagana. Lisa crouched in front of the terrified Hagana. Sensing that, Hagana flinched back. Even though there was nowhere left to retreat, she pulled back. Lisa gently grasped Hagana's thin wrists and wrapped her hands around her shaking fingers. Hagana, it's okay. It's all right. Gently putting her head against Hagana's, Lisa whispered over and over. It seemed like each time Hagana said that she was sorry, Lisa would say that it was all right. Calmed down? She murmured softly in Hagana's ear. Somehow she even seemed to be smiling in enjoyment. Hagana was making sobbing sounds. Lisa didn't rush. Eventually, Hagana's small head moved. Her teary eyes peered through her disheveled hair. Hagana, do you know who I am? Lisa asked. Hagana stared at Lisa with a teary, exhausted face. Eventually, with fresh tears overflowing in her eyes, she nodded slowly. That's a good girl. Saying that, Lisa embraced Hagana's head. I'm sorry. Hagana repeated herself again, but not in the childlike way she had before. It was a clearer, more well-defined thing. Okay. Hagana, to be honest, your elbow really hurt. The bruise on Lisa's face was apparently from Hagana's elbow. She must have struck with quite a bit of force. But that was something like an accident. I'm not angry. But it's true that I don't approve of going to Mr. Toyama without thinking about the consequences, along with what you did there. Hagana fell silent, but it was different from when she had been terrified. While she was in Lisa's arms, the fact that Agana wanted to make an excuse was apparent even to me. Thanks to the situation, even Lisa smiled wryly as she held Agana. But that was something that you did for me, right? Lisa asked as she once again embraced Agana. The darkly dressed small girl in Lisa's arms nodded repeatedly like a heartbeat. Those feelings make me happy, very much so. Agana looked up and Lisa met her gaze full on with a smile. Agana had calmed down for the most part, but now once again burst into tears. Lisa cradled Agana's head gently against her chest. Agana, Hal's by the door. If you cry too much, he's going to notice. I saw her shrink down in Lisa's arms. You're using me for that? I glared at Lisa, but she only winked at me out of the corner of her eye. Unable to object, I hid myself by the side of the door. And also, Hal's got a few things he wants to talk to you about. You shouldn't say that. I couldn't hear it, but apparently Lisa had heard something. It was probably something like she had nothing to say to me anyway. I heard that you said terrible things about Hal. He was really hurt by that. While explaining the investing contest and the possibility of using Hagana's talent in math, I had also told that whole story. If she thought that I was some worthless punk who never worked and stole money from houses, this whole plan wouldn't even stand up, not to mention my pride. However, I was silently cheering on Lisa to say more. Hagana should learn that her words could hurt other people. Plus, I heard that all of that was a misunderstanding on your part. Lies. That word I could clearly hear. Right after, I heard Lisa laughing lightly. Hagana, you're surprisingly childish, you know that. Lisa was very good at jabbing at the person's pride. Just maybe, I might not have to sell my books. What? Thanks to Hal. From the sound of cloth rustling, I knew that Hagana had raised her head. Along the way, you could almost hear the sound of her face scrunching up at Lisa's words. Hal seems to be working properly. Well, I wonder if it's called work. I don't really get it, but in any case, he's earning money. Quite a bit of it. Really? Really. Even I'm a bit surprised. It was quite a bit of money, so it seemed Hal was afraid and didn't say anything. Well, it makes sense. If you can't trust Hal, then he can't trust you. Do you understand what I'm saying? When I peeked in the room, Lisa was combing Hagana's hair with her fingers, while caressing Hagana's stubborn face. But Hal said that he'd lend us the money he worked hard to gather, under certain circumstances. A whole 50,000 moles, you know? At Lisa's words, Hagana made a pained face. Hagana had thought that she was unable to gather that sort of money by herself, and had no choice but to sell herself. But, as you know, Hal's got that rather level-headed personality, so there are conditions. It's that you lend him your skills. Huh? Hagana was clearly surprised. Her eyes had been on the verge of sleep as Lisa brushed her hair, but now they were wide open. Do you understand? Hal is saying he wants to borrow your skills. Mine? Yes, your skill at math. If Hagana had been quite literally purchased from the earth and brought here for her math abilities, then the proposal was a very awkward one to me. But I had absolutely no intention of saying I wanted to buy her powers. Lisa had also confirmed that point very thoroughly with me. It seems that he wanted to say it much sooner. But you got furious, shouted, and kicked him in the leg, so he couldn't say it. Hagana sulked childishly and looked down. Lisa laughed and her gaze drifted up while still keeping her head down. I don't think there's any other conditions than that. Hagana, someone truly needs your one best skill. And that would save Lisa and moreover be useful to me, and probably would even save Hagana herself. If her skill in math could bring success in trading, then Hagana would have found a way to make money for herself. It was the same as obtaining a tool to solve many of the problems that caused her all this pain for so long. Hagana. Hagana slowly looked up when Lisa called her name. What would I do? What? There Lisa's words hesitated. Inside, I was a bit exasperated, but Lisa didn't seem very knowledgeable about this sort of thing, so there was no helping it. How? Lisa called out. As I sat next to the doorframe with my back to the wall, I answered her. What? Explain things to Hagana, please. At Lisa's words, I half rose, then stopped short. Does that mean I can go over there? Hagana probably didn't want me to see her teary face. Lisa laughed a bit at me when I asked her that question, as it contained a bit of self-deprecation. How about it, Hagana? Lisa asked the question, and apparently Hagana whispered something in her ear. After a bit of whispering, Lisa answered. Can you wait just 10 minutes? What? When I replied, Lisa left some words with Hagana before standing up. Then, sticking her head out of the room, she looked down at me and spoke. A lady needs time to be presentable. Is that so? Just wait a minute, okay? Still seated, I dropped my shoulders and made to go back to my room whilst shaking my head. Lisa called out to me from behind. How? Now what? Thank you. Saying that when I turned my head around, Lisa then popped back into the room. For a while, I continued to stand looking backwards. It's not like we had solved any issues at this very moment. But even then, the rundown and rusty gears seemed to start moving together again. Whether they'd end up turning smoothly, no one knew. However, as I returned to my room, a lightness was in my chest. You made the right choice. Lisa called for me 10 minutes later, and I went out to the living room. I'm sorry. Those words were the first words said to me the instant I returned to the living room and faced Hagana with a table between us. It was so sudden I forgot to breathe. Her eyes still had some traces of her crying, and her lips were still somewhat sullenly tight with stubbornness. Hagana didn't look at me and stared at the table, but I clearly heard her say she was sorry. When I looked at Lisa haltingly, she had a satisfied smile on her face. I apologized. When Hagana finally opened her mouth, that was what came out. Lisa's smiling face remained frozen that way, but I was more relieved at those words. I heard. When I said that, she finally looked at me. That usual piercing gaze was the same, but the sharp, stray, cat-like suspicion wasn't there. It was more like a kid who was being stubborn and on a brave face. So, Hal, you're fine with this too, right? It's good. I shrugged. Well then, can you explain things more concretely? I didn't really get it with just one run-through. With that embarrassed laugh, she probably really didn't understand the stuff very well. But even if that were true, then that meant Lisa trusted me despite not really grasping what I had said. It's not difficult. Win the investing contest, get 200,000 moles. When I said that directly, Hagana's eyes went so wide they looked almost round. There's that thing called stock investing, right? In a simulation of that, compete with other people, and the guy who earns the most wins. First prize is 200,000 moles, second is 50,000. So we just have to get second, right? Third place gets 30,000 moles, which I'd be thankful for. Lisa pressed her lips together lightly, then urged me with her hands to go on. But I don't know anything about stocks. Right, so that's Agana. But I don't know anything about stocks. Agana was the one who interrupted. She was glaring at me bravely, but I saw that she was uneasy. Somehow, once you noticed these inconsistencies, Agana really did seem unsteady and fragile. You're smart, aren't you? But it seemed that she had the strength left to handle my jabs. Compared to you, brat. Agana. Lisa gave a small warning. Choking off her words with a small she looked at Lisa. She then looked at me. Compared to you, how? Then there's no problem, because the rules are very simple. Really? Lisa was the one who asked. The basic idea is to buy a stock when it's low and sell when it's high. Simple, right? Both Lisa and Hagana looked at each other quickly, then turned and looked at me at the same time. That's really all there is. Of course, there's a way to sell high and buy back when it's low too. But that stuff is for later. Right now, the basis of our talk lies somewhere else. As I spoke, I worked with the laptop and drew up a stock, displaying its trading info. It was the most famous company on the moon, WORLD Industries. If you look at the stocks closely, it boils down to one thing. This company's stock, let's say tomorrow, the day after, or even in the next few minutes, in any case, sometime in the future, if you can predict that it will be higher or lower, then you'd be able to profit from it. Spinning the laptop around, I set it in front of Lisa and Hagana. Lisa looked like she was getting a headache just from glancing at the numbers and graphs. Hagana peered intently at it, like a cat peering into a mirror. There's a number of places to get clues. Leaning over, I turned the laptop halfway towards myself. Hagana looked at me, then at the laptop. First? How? Why don't you come over here? Well, isn't it hard to explain like that? Saying that, she got up from her chair and walked to the other side of the table. That is to say, my side, and sat next to me. I'm just absolutely no good at this stuff, Lisa said with true distaste. For some weirdo who came to the moon to learn about religious history, she probably didn't mix well with the moon colony's biggest alchemic art. At the very least, listen. As I spoke, I got off my chair and went to where Lisa had been sitting. For an instant, I was thinking Hagana might object, but she paid me no heed and continued looking at the information display. Those black eyes of hers, with the laptop screen's white light reflected in them, shone like jewels. When I sat next to her, I spun the laptop towards us. Drawn by that, Hagana's face followed it as if she really were a cat. As if she had only now realized where I was, she gave me a brief glance before turning back to the screen. Okay. Stocks have a price. Weekdays from 9 AM to 5 PM, they're traded. When there are lots of buyers, the price obviously goes up. When there are lots of sellers, it goes down. Obviously? Right. But it's hard to predict that obvious thing. Hagana's eyes were wide with curiosity and looked steadily at me. Why? Because no one really knows whether that company would make a profit or not. Stocks are essentially a piece of ownership of a company. If you buy up all the stock that a company issues, then you become the owner of the company. If the company makes a profit and you control the company, then it's silly if you don't become rich, right? That's why the stock of profitable companies goes up. And if they don't profit, it falls. Exactly. However, whether a company is profitable every single day, no one, not even the company's workers, know. Take WORLD Industries, for example. on the moon and on Earth. They have around 300,000 workers, and if you add in their partners, there's 1 million. To know every last transaction they make, it's impossible. Then, what do we do? Don't know. Everyone guesses and trades. Agana looked up from the laptop and glared at me. Lies. It's true. But then... Agana said that, then looked back at the screen, then back at me. Everyone is betting money on this, aren't they? Yep. That's why they're guessing very seriously. When Lisa, sitting across the table, heard this, she gave a little laugh. There's a number of ways to guess. One is to research the company and decide whether it's profitable or not. This Emerald Industries is the only company that can repair the space elevators. Every year, a huge amount of money is sure to come in. On top of that, they're involved in much of the development of the lunar surface. It's an ultra top ranked company. They also made the dome. That was from when we went to buy clothes. When I thought about her remembering that conversation, it made me a bit happy. Yep, they also made the 2 skies. Amazing. Yes, it's an amazing company, and everyone thinks it'll be profitable. Then we just have to buy this? Basically. But it's obvious it's profitable, so everyone buys it. When everyone buys it, the price goes up. When that's the case, the price can go up past the price where it should be. See, there's this PE here. Yeah. If stock is ownership of the company, and if a company had 100 shares, then 1 share would be worth about 1/100th of the company. Oh, whoops. Yes. Now, the profit of that company divided among the shares would give an indication of whether the share price was high or not. I played with the laptop screen and enlarged the selected part. If 1 share of a company was earning only 10 moles, but the stock price was 1 million moles, while another company was earning only 10 moles but priced at 20 moles, which would you buy? Lisa was already clutching her head in her seat. Meanwhile, Agana, without the slightest hint of doubt, I'm sure it's meant to say, looked at me directly and spoke. The 20 mole stock. Right. For the amount of money paid out, the amount of money earned is different. No matter how great the company, if the stock price continues climbing faster than its profits, then it will inevitably hit an inaffordable price. And I'm supposed to predict that? With math? Nope. When I said that, Hagana's brows furrowed. It probably seemed like I was being spiteful, or explaining things in a roundabout way, but I was sure Hagana didn't feel as upset as she looked. For some reason, I just felt that. But now, you've got a sense of what stocks are, right? Just the parts Just the parts you explained. How? Hagana decided to change her tone halfway through on her own. Lisa had on an extremely happy smile, and of course Hagana didn't miss that. She made little embarrassed glances at Lisa, but since Lisa got up from her chair, she looked back at me in relief. So, in general, predicting a stock involves deciding whether it will be profitable or not. But, like I said before, no one knows what's going on every day, let alone next month, next year. There have been ultra top ranked companies that had an accident, paid a deathly amount of compensation, and went out of business. That happens quite a bit. That's why everyone uses a different method of predicting. Math? Calm down. When I laughed, Hagana made a face like I had flicked her nose with my finger. Then she came back to herself and glared at me. From the pout on her lips, she was saying that she was embarrassing. That was embarrassing. If I don't explain some other things first, it's hard to explain why. At my words, Hagana hesitated a little, but eventually nodded. This here is the graph of a stock price. Returning to the information page, I indicated the zigzagging line in the center of the screen. Every day, the stock price is plotted and the points are connected. They call these charts. It's all choppy. Exactly, but because Emerald Industries is profitable, it's overall going up in value. Yeah. For other companies, it doesn't work that way. For example, this one, or this, so on. Yeah. So there's as many graphs as there are kinds of stocks and times of trades. Uh-huh. Thousands of stocks, decades of time. And so some bored fellow noticed one day. In the center of that chart, there's a few distinctive things. Hagana stared at me, then looked at the chart on the screen. The most famous one would be this head and shoulders thing. See how in the center there's a mountain, and on both sides there are smaller mountains. Isn't it like a person's head and shoulders? Somewhat. When this shape comes up, the big mountain is often the peak for the price, and in the future, the chances it's going to slide down are high. Really? That's what they say. Don't get mad. I'm saying that from looking at past charts, there's a way to predict what will happen in the future. Hagana looked like a kid used to being tricked and being very cautious, but she managed to nod. It was there that Lisa, who had stood up from her chair to do something by the sink, came over with Coco. Anyway, the method of predicting this or that with a graph uses a form of math. For example, Hagana's expression changed. See how there's a smooth line behind the jagged ones? That's also a stock price. That's called a moving average. For example, if you start on May 1st, and from there take the last 30 days of prices and then plot the average, then, next to it, on May 2nd, you take the last 30 days of prices and plot that. When you do that, the line becomes quite smooth. Yeah. Even if the daily movements are really zigzaggy, when you average them like this, you can sort of tell it's going up, whether it's going up or down or sideways. And there's a way of trading where you trust in those big movements. If the big line is trending upwards, then it feels like it's going to go up forever, doesn't it? Hagana looked at the graph and nodded sincerely. So, there's a way of trading where guys with too much time on their hands look at charts of companies over the days, and by looking at the moving averages, predict whether things will go up or down. That kind of calculation isn't hard. I'm supposed to do that? Well, you could, but given enough time, even I could do that. Analyzing charts was apparently the first thing beginners in stocks do. When you open an account, you can use a tool that has tons of famous charts, analyzing tools built into it for free. But before I started trading, I tried using it for a few things, and was sure that none of them was useful. So, the thing I want you to try and do is one step beyond this stuff. Beyond? Yeah. Did you ever see the space elevator's service diagrams? Hagana blinked at my question. The space elevators? Yeah, that thing shows predictions about whether trash would strike it, right? Yeah. Physics can predict to insane accuracy the movements of the tiny lump that's flying around in orbit at a few tens of kilometers a second. It's predicting the future, right? I don't really know much about physics, but probably, yes. If that's the case, there seems to be some that think that we might be able to predict the movements of stock prices with maths, just like with heavenly bodies. Hagana looked quietly at me and then at the screen. So essentially, find formulae that draw this graph. Exactly. Whether it's possible, I don't know. However, in the world there are those who are making huge profits with such a method. Can it be done? Hagana's question was natural. Even myself, I was half believing, half doubting. However, it was better than doing nothing. Infinitely better. Even if we didn't know whether we'd reach our destination, as long as we didn't move, we'd never get there. Because of that, I myself ran away from my home village. I don't know. When I answered, Hagana grimaced and looked at me. Feeling Hagana's gaze on my cheek, I looked at the screen and spoke. But it's not about whether we can or can't. Huh? We have no choice but to do it. In the corner of my eye, I could see that Hagana was stunned. Her mouth tried to move and say something, but words didn't form, and her lips just chewed the air. Besides, the prize is 200,000 moles, no entry fee. Is there a reason we shouldn't participate? Hagana had been lamenting over how her strength at math was so powerless at solving real-world problems. This investing contest would definitely become a tiny lead to Hagana finding a way forward. Of course, I would reap rewards myself. While looking at me, she held her breath. From there, she looked at the computer screen out of the corner of her eye and looked back at me. Her face was frozen stiff, like she had been left in the mother of all freezers. However, Hagana was staring at me. Those black eyes kept looking steadily at me. The moon wasn't a nice, friendly place that carried people who didn't try to walk on their own feet. However, those who try could have their hands held. I gazed back at Hagana, and then Hagana said this. Out of 5,421. What? I had managed to derive all the way to the 3,227th. There wasn't one I couldn't solve. It took a full 10 seconds to realize she was talking about the math theorems that she had continued to derive in her room for the longest time. Hagana spent that time with determination. Or perhaps, for a girl who had been sold to the moon, it took that much courage. Therefore, it should be solvable. Lisa had said that Hagana was a serious girl. I had thought that she was just stubborn, but when I realized that Hagana was clutching her fists fiercely beneath the table, I accepted Lisa's words. It should be solvable. Hagana repeated that and closed her eyes. I sensed strength in that pose, because I knew just how defiant Hagana was. When she opened her eyes, Hagana took a clear step forward. Teach me all the rules. Accepting those words, I answered. You got it. I had this feeling that Lisa, who had sat on the sofa after making the cocoa, was smiling as she watched us. Alright. I am 100% saving it there. I've been going on longer than expected, but that scene was very emotional. I didn't want to interrupt it. This is really good. I think this was one of my best episodes because I barely stuttered over my words and my throat's not dying as well, so I think that was one of the better episodes. I'll make sure the volume is properly evened out. I know sometimes I'm quiet, but yeah, no, that was good. So yeah, as predicted, they're going to I don't know how much time they have to pay off the loan, but it sounds like Hal is going to give them the money first, and then Hagana is gonna help, I think. But yeah, no, that was really, really good. I'm very interested and very intrigued. I am not intrigued for more discussions about stocks, but if that's gotta happen, then it's gotta happen. Whatever, figure it out. But yeah, for now, thank you so much everybody for watching. I hope you enjoyed this episode. Don't forget to check out the link in the description to pre-order or purchase a copy of my book, The Protector Volume 1, and please, if you haven't already, subscribe. I will see you all next time.